Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast. I am your host, Richie, and a happy Sunday to all. It will be a happy Sunday for two of the four teams playing today as the Los Angeles Rams take it to the Northeast, making a trip into Lincoln Financial Field, a place where the Eagles have only lost one regular season game this year. We also have the mega matchup of the two most probable MVP candidates as Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills today host the Baltimore Ravens. Definitely going to be a star-studded affair in that one, and definitely a game that is going to define two legacies of two phenomenal quarterbacks. Because if you're a quarterback in the AFC, sadly, you have played second fiddle to Patrick Mahomes. And that's not an insult to any of the quarterbacks, whether it is Joe Burrow, whether it is Lamar Jackson, whether it is Josh Allen. But today is going to be a big one for the rights to play the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC title game. Shocker of yesterday, the Washington Commanders went into the Motor City and just roughed up and embarrassed the Detroit Lions, the NFC 1 seed, in something that was just truly remarkable in every sense of the word. Magic Johnson, part of the ownership team out in D.C., closing in on a ring yet again, potentially, which would make him someone who possesses a ring in each of the four major sports. The Los Angeles Kings in hockey, the Los Angeles Dodgers in baseball, the Los Angeles Lakers on the hardwood as a player, as he won 5 NBA championships while being the face of the NBA for a good portion of that. So really just an exceptional performance. And I think it really speaks volumes on how bad Detroit was dealing with injuries. You know, it was something that they tried to patch up during the course of the regular season, something they tried to match. But there was just too much adversity, in my opinion, against the Lions. And when you have a team that is believing in themselves the way that the Commanders are, you have a rookie, Jaden Daniels, who I think put the debate to rest that he is indeed the offensive rookie of the year. You know, you're going to get something that looks like that. You know, I think I might have overestimated the Lions when some of the signs were there earlier in the year. When Buffalo went in there less than a month ago and really had that offensive explosion against them, that was a warning that the Lions could potentially be in trouble. The game against Green Bay, where the Lions allowed Green Bay to come back. And I think one of the craziest things about this season for the Detroit Lions, now granted, they only lost 3 games, playoffs included, is that all of their failures did occur in Detroit. You know, this is a team that pounded down the Minnesota Vikings, the final game of the regular season, to decide who was going to be the 1 seed. And after taking a step back and looking at it a little deeper and considering the way Minnesota played against the Rams on a neutral field, I wonder if that particular game said more about where the Vikings were as opposed to where the Lions were. But, you know, congratulations to Dan Campbell on a great season and his team. But I do want to make a mention that last year, it was a Monday after the Lions had that heartbreaking hiccup against the 49ers when they blew that big lead. And when a lot of it was on Dan Campbell just doing a lot of reckless stuff. And I said this on that show. There's no guarantee that those guys would be back. You know, you get limited opportunities in this league for greatness, and winning championships and going back to consecutive title games, things of that nature, just very, very difficult to do no matter how talented your team is, because the margin for error as you get closer to these games becomes smaller and smaller. But congratulations to the Washington Commanders. They are a wild card. They are a 6 seed. They are waiting the winner of today's game between the Eagles and Rams. It's no secret that I would love to see the Los Angeles Rams win. You know, as a Giants fan, I always root against the Eagles. But, you know, taking the fan hat off and just calling it down the middle, given the weather variable, I do believe the Eagles are going to take care of business today to the tune of a victory 34-24 over the Rams. I think the Rams are going to show up. I think the Rams are going to compete. But I think the Eagles ultimately will win that game. And it sets up an all NFC East battle for rights to go to the Super Bowl. And I got to think about this for a moment because I don't have this at the top of my head or anything to look at. But if I'm not mistaken, the last time the NFC East had two teams in the title game with the rights to go to the Super Bowl, I'm going to have to fact check this, but I do believe you would have to go all the way back to the New York Football Giants against the Washington Commanders in the famous wind game, where Bill Parcells decided to go against the wind early. Go against the wind early. I would have to double check that, but I do believe that's the last time the NFC East had two teams in this particular game. And that was a lifetime ago. That was the season where the Giants won their first Super Bowl. And that was during a time where Joe Gibbs won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks for the former Redskins, now the Commanders. But hell of an accomplishment. You know, you talk about just exceeding expectations. This was a team that fought and clawed in the final game of the year against the Atlanta Falcons. This is a team that looked dead to rights against Tampa and had one of the most fortunate series of events to win that game on the road. Now you go into a hostile environment in Detroit, a team that has never won a Super Bowl and on most people's metrics, the best team in the conference all season long, and just bully them. You know, there was a lot of things and reasons why this happened. And while we could talk about the Detroit injuries all day long, and I did mention them, the bottom line is that the Washington Commanders wanted it more. The Washington Commanders were ready to shock the world. And Dan Quinn has done a hell of a job with that organization. And I'm sure that Jerry Jones is very much in regret mode, letting Dan Campbell out the door and choosing to stick with Mike McCarthy one more year, because the Dallas Cowboys will be looking for their next head coach. And although there are conflicting reports about what Deion Sanders wants to do, I do believe that if the Cowboys can find a way to trade into the top 5 and kind of do it as a father and son pairing, Deion Sanders and Shador may very well be headed to Dallas. So that's going to be a big offseason topic to keep an eye on. I want to speak on the defending world champion Kansas City Chiefs. I believe they would have won the game regardless. I want to make that clear. However, I think as fans and consumers of this sport, we are just so very tired of the very shady doings that just seem to happen with the officials in most games that the Chiefs play. Yesterday, Patrick Mahomes was in a situation where he was trying to keep a play alive. And, you know, Mahomes is so good with his hips and his movement and pump fakes, things of that nature. And, you know, his herky-jerky style of play. But he never truly gave himself up. It was a momentum swinging play where 2 Texan players actually tackled each other, and Mahomes was never even hit. Yet it's a 15-yard penalty. And, you know, when you're going into Arrowhead as a visitor, when the Chiefs are on this kind of historical run, it's not only going to take your best effort, it's going to take a little bit of luck as well. And I think as fans, we are just kind of tired that the Chiefs always seem to get every 50-50 call, and sometimes just some of the egregious non-calls that you see during the course of the year. And I know that when being a champion, one of the rewards is you do get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the Zebras. That's nothing new. You know, we saw this with the New England Patriots. We've seen it with champions before them. But, you know, it gets to a point where you want to feel that the NFL is not insulting your intelligence. The Chiefs are a great team. They've got the best defensive coordinator in the world in Steve Spagnuolo. They got more than likely the best head coach in the league in Andy Reid. And Patrick Mahomes' resume speaks for itself. You know, if they're going to do it again and if they're going to three-peat and whatever else happens, you want it to feel a little more real. And unfortunately, it just seems like anytime the Chiefs are in any sort of questionable trouble, the referees find a way to make sure that things are going to be okay. I'm not trying to insinuate that it's stronger than that. People can use that to their own discretion, but it's the way I feel. And I think it's the way that a lot of NFL fans feel, and they're tired of this crap. Gonna move it along to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Got some news. When I promoted the show a little while ago, I was going to key in on Roki Sasaki, who is now a member of the Dodgers, yet another huge Japanese acquisition. And what once upon a time was the New York Yankees as the baseball pipeline to get the next hot kid or next hot veteran out of Japan, it seems like the Dodgers have more than supplanted them as the destination. And I think, a big thank you for that, if you're a Dodger fan, goes to the phenomenal Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani is considered a god and a legend of baseball in his home of Japan, and rightfully so. And quite frankly, with the limitless dollars that the Dodgers are willing to spend and bust up every luxury tax, they also allocate funds where they do smart stuff like with Ohtani, backloading the contract. It's a new trend that you're seeing in MLB where a lot of guys are making these big contracts. But the point is, the Los Angeles Dodgers, yet again, just get a phenomenal talent. And as the defending champions, no matter what some of the other contenders do, whether they're the Mets, the Yankees, the Phillies, the Braves, etc., it's going to be very hard to knock this team off based on a talent standpoint, because this team is so deep that they can afford injuries and still be all right. And just before I went live, about 5 to 10 minutes before, I saw something coming over my feed, and I looked into it, and it is true. Tanner Scott is headed to the Dodgers now as well. One of the sought-after bullpen arms, a guy that can close out games at a very successful rate. And yet again, the Dodgers just keep piling on the talent. When you look at that roster, they can conceivably break MLB records on a year-to-year basis and re-break records by sending the most amount of all-stars. This team is loaded, truly loaded. And, from an encouraging standpoint, as a Yankee fan, being the runner-ups last year, I try to say and look at things like this and be like, hey, man, they only outscored us by a run or two. It was a great series. It ended prematurely. We definitely made some blunders. But the bottom line is the Dodgers are the kind of team that you cannot afford to make mistakes to. That's how good they are. That's how deep they are. That's how well managed they are. And they're going to be around for a long time. And I would be a hypocrite if I'm going to talk smack, and I won't do it. Because in the 1990s, the New York Yankees, maybe not on this metric, but in their own way back then, did everything possible to bleed out farm systems of other teams, rather trade out their farm hands for big time names and keep their dynasty going. But the bottom line is, the Yankees did it with homegrown talent. The core four. I personally hate that core four stuff because I think Bernie Williams needs to be a part of some of that, being that he was the first recognizable player of the turnaround. But regardless, the Dodgers are great. They're going to continue to be great. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out during the course of the new Major League season. Scottie Pippen on the hate train yet again. We had a lot of fun over the course of the last year or so with some Scottie Pippen segments. And it sucks, man, because although I am a devout New York Knicks fan, I'm a fan of the game and I'm a fan of different talents that played the game. And I must admit, Scottie Pippen was one of those players that I wish I was good enough to emulate and play like. He was the revolutionary in a lot of ways of the point forward position, because the Bulls never did have a natural point guard during the Jordan era. He was undeniably Jordan's sidekick, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. The man made the dream team. The man has 6 rings. The man was all NBA defense a decent amount of times. He led the league in steals. He shut down Magic Johnson in their first finals, which they won. Pippen's legacy has never been up for debate. But when you are going out of your way to throw shade at two of the greatest basketball players of all time, as many of you know, Pippen was not happy with the events that went down in The Last Dance. And he took it upon himself to really go after Michael Jordan, reneging on things that he said in the past about how he feels that Jordan is the superior player to LeBron. Flip-flopping, saying LeBron was the superior player to Jordan. Going as far as saying that in some interviews he was better than Mike, which is an insult to all our intelligence. But most recently, just to give you an idea of how much this man flip-flops, Scottie Pippen, LeBron James isn't better than me until he wins 6 championships. Scottie, with all due respect, LeBron doesn't have to win 6 to be better than you. You've never, ever carried a team to the promised land. You were a piece of a team. You didn't do it in Portland when you left Chicago. And in 94, you had a great MVP caliber season. And Hugh Hollins probably screwed you over on the Hubert Davis call. But the bottom line is you guys lost in 7, and you tainted your legacy for the first time in that series when you decided to not go in a game when instructed to by the greatest coach in the history of the NBA. That would be Phil Jackson. Tony Kukoc made the shot over the late Anthony Mason. Unacceptable behavior, Scottie. That's not what leaders do. That's not what leaders do. I always believed LeBron James was the greatest player this game has ever seen. He does everything and embodies what the game is truly about. Yet again, Scottie Pippen. And while I don't have an issue with any former jock having an opinion about today's game, because believe me, many of them do, you lose your reputability and your credibility, and you start tarnishing your legacy when you flip-flop as frequently as Scottie Pippen does. You know, Scottie Pippen just comes off as a very bitter old man, and it's very unfortunate because as a basketball fan who enjoyed the latter part of the 80s, all of the 90s, and everything since, I know the kind of player that Scottie Pippen was. I know the kind of contributions he made. But one thing that I will also say, even before all this blasphemous talk about LeBron and Mike, Scottie always had a selfish bone to him. He was very angry with the Bulls organization that they never altered his contract after he was severely underpaid. But to be fair, he was also told by Bulls ownership that they would not revisit the contract. Scottie made a decision. He likes to talk about how him and Michael Jordan never had a meal together. But he doesn't share that story about how Michael Jordan gave him a $300,000 Ferrari for his birthday. He won't talk about that, though. I'm sorry, Scottie. You're messing up on so many different levels. There's no Bull tour that you won on. It's blasphemy, bro. Be comfortable with your legacy. When you talk about small forwards that played the beautiful game of basketball, you can make an argument that Scottie Pippen is a top 5 small forward. You can make an argument that he is a top 550 player. I mean, after all, he was named one. Maybe you rank him even higher than that. Scottie was a phenomenal player. And he did indeed help the Bulls win 6. Mike would be the first one to say that. Yeah, we get it. Jordan never won without Pippen. But to be fair, Pippen never won without Jordan either. Blasphemy. Stop it, Scottie. You're better than that. Or at least I thought you were. Before I get out of here, final thoughts on today's 2 games. I got the Eagles winning 34-24. I think Saquon Barkley is going to have a big, big game. In order for the Rams to pull the upset, they are going to have to limit Saquon Barkley, which is going to be an unenviable task when you consider how good that Eagles offensive line is. And they're going to have to force Jalen Hurts to throw a lot more than the game plan suggests. But I don't see it that way. I think the Rams are a really good team. I just think that this is one of those really, really tall task matchups. But after what we saw Washington accomplish yesterday, anything is truly possible. As the Ravens and the Bills go, I must admit I would like to see the Buffalo Bills win. I have a lot of respect for their fan base. You know, this is an organization that has waited and had their hearts broken during the 90s, losing 4 consecutive Super Bowls to the NFC East. And on a sidebar, how crazy would it be if they played the Eagles? Either way, there's going to be some trash talk. If you beat the Eagles are the only team that couldn't beat the Bills. And if you lose to them, you lost to the entire NFC East division. I saw a thread today asking who the pressure is on more. Is it Lamar Jackson? Is it Josh Allen? And quite frankly, I think it's on both of them. Lamar has the hardware with the MVPs and potentially a third one on the way. But Josh Allen has had these home games. You got to win the home games if you're that dude. It's not fair, but it is what it is. I think both of them have been under much unfair scrutiny over the course of their careers. I think for a long time, Lamar had to prove that he was even worthy of being a quarterback, which was pretty egregious. Lamar is so talented. He broke Michael Vick's career rushing record for the quarterback position. And I think over the course of the last 3 years, Lamar has evolved as a passer. And I think people are starting to finally give that man his roses. As Josh Allen goes, I personally think he does more for his team than any other quarterback does for any other team, what he's asked to do. He loses Stephon Diggs. His defense has not been as good as they were a few years ago. But Josh Allen is that dude. And one thing I admire about both these players is that when things don't go their way, they are front and center, taking the brunt of the responsibility. And I think it speaks volumes about the kind of men both of these guys are. One thing I will say, whoever wins, you're getting a quality individual on and off the football field that will be challenging the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. I personally think that the winner of this game will beat the Chiefs. I think both these teams are better than the Chiefs, but that remains to be seen. Last year I didn't think the Chiefs were good enough to do it, and they won it all. But it's going to be a lot of fun today for the football fans. And Monday's going to be exciting for me on a personal level as my Fighting Irish and Notre Dame try to pull off the upset and beat Ohio State. My panel was not too confident with the Notre Dame upset. Of course, one of my co-hosts, Mike Zappi, who's also an Irish fan, was not available. So I know it would have at least been 2-on-2 when it comes to Shed and Idris disagreeing with me. But it's been a long time coming. Regardless of the result, I am very proud of what the Fighting Irish have accomplished this year. And Coach Freeman has been a true godsend, no pun intended, to the University of Notre Dame. Until next time, I am Richie. I hope all of you have a great Sunday. Enjoy football if that's what you're doing. And whatever you're doing, just have a great day and be safe out there. Be back soon with announcements to come. Take care.